Hello and welcome to Not the Podcast. I'm Jake and I've finally decided to do kind of a proper video. So the other day, some buddies and I were discussing the new ARMA Reforger Beta that they just dropped earlier in the week. And, it takes place in the 1980s. It takes place kind of loosely based around a Reforger. And it has that peak aesthetic of woodland, that Cold War era. And, it got me thinking, do people know a lot about Reforger? Like, why did it happen? When did it happen? What led to the need for Reforger? All those types of questions. So I figured, might as well talk about it, do a video about it, and actually make it, kind of long, not just the 60 seconds or less type thing. So stick along, and, I try to answer as many of those questions as I can. So let's just get right into it. So Reforger is more than just a catchy name. It actually breaks down to three parts. Return of forces to Germany. So to explain why the forces had to return in the first place, we gotta go back and look at the US presence in Europe post-World War II. On June 24, 1948, the Soviet Union placed a blockade on Berlin, preventing the Western Allies from reaching the city by road, railway, and canal access. Though severely outnumbered, the Western Allies were able to thwart the attempt to blockade the city by airlifting supplies. The blockade would end on May 12, 1949, but this was a major escalation for the region and would lead to the U.S. revising their current command and control structure. A new Joint Service Command was established on August 1, 1952, and will be known as the United States European Command. This command was created to provide unified authority over all U.S. forces in Europe. Tensions would continue to rise as the Soviet and East German leaders would start to cut off the West from their side of Berlin.
It is equally clear that the role of the United States as a deterrent force in Western Europe must be firmly established.
This culminated with the construction of the Berlin Wall starting on August 12, 1961. It was now clear that the U.S. would always have to leave a large contingent of troops in Europe. To make matters even worse for the Western Allies, in 1966, France would withdraw from NATO and demand all NATO bases be moved out of France. Congress would also soon begin to question the use of maintaining such a large force in Europe and would start to demand the numbers of troops be reduced. The Army, in an effort to satisfy Congress, would bring 2 brigades back and leave equipment in Europe so the units could be sent back if needed. They would be assigned to U.S. Army Europe, but only on paper. This roughly becomes the concept behind Reforger. During all of this, the U.S. was starting to get more and more involved in Vietnam, complicating things even further. By 1968, President Lyndon Johnson had decided to withdraw roughly 2 divisions from Europe. This posed the problem that the U.S. would start to struggle with maintaining its commitment to Western Europe. On the flip side, however, this would also allow the U.S. to demonstrate its capability to rapidly reinforce the region with a large force to prevent or deter future aggression. The driving idea behind all of this is to move 10 divisions in 10 days back to Europe. The plan for what would become the exercise, however, would only call for at least 1 division-sized element to be deployed. Different divisions would be rotated each year, that way the training could be spread throughout the Army. Reforger 1 would start on January 6, 1969, and would involve both HQ and 2nd Squadron of the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, along with the 24th Infantry Division. The first exercise would involve the movement of over 12,000 troops. With each passing year, more and more troops would rotate over to Europe to participate in this yearly event. At its height, Reforger 1988 would be the largest, with 125,000 troops deployed. In 1989, there was no Reforger. This was the only year during the course of its existence that did not have a proper Reforger. It would then be drastically reduced in size following the fall of the Berlin Wall and then collapse of the Soviet Union. By 1993, the last exercise to happen was mostly simulated and was only a fraction of the size of the previous Reforger. One of the key elements of Reforger was the use of pre-stage equipment already in Europe. These were referred to as POMKIS sites. I'm not actually sure if that's what they would be called, but generally speaking, we always seem to turn these acronyms into just words. So POMKIS stands for Pre-Positioning of Material Configured in Unit Sets. Basically, the idea was troops with their basic gear would be flown in via the Civil Air Fleet commercial airliners and draw their equipment from these sites. This meant that as long as the troops could get to the sites, they would be ready quickly and would not have to wait for the equipment to arrive. At least 3 divisions worth of equipment would be spread across West Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. As time would go on, these would evolve from pre-existing underground facilities and open-air lots to large aluminum over steel warehouses that included some of the earliest use of barcodes by the Army. Reforger ended up being a great tool and training mechanism for the U.S. Army. It would force the Army and Air Force to work together more efficiently in troop movements and logistics. The training involved was crucial in shaping the modern U.S. Army, paving the way for the effectiveness seen during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Some of the plans to move units to the Middle East drew directly from past Reforgers, allowing for rapid deployment to that region. Reforger also wasn't the only exercise being held by the U.S. military during that time. Operation Bright Star, which started in fiscal year 81, was a similar mission taking place in Egypt. But maybe I'll save that for a video in the future. Okay, so that is Reforger. I probably missed a few things. Sourcing information on this was surprisingly more difficult than I initially thought it would be. If I did miss anything or got something wrong, please let me know in the comments below. I always like to have those mistakes pointed out so I can make corrections and whatnot. On a side note, though, if you have played the beta for ARMA Reforger or plan on it, what are your thoughts? What do you think about it? Curious, how it is? Is it worth it? Drop me a comment below. Give me a heads up on all that. As far as the podcasts go, this is just a little update on it. I think I'm going to switch over to a 3-week schedule instead of a 2-week schedule. To make it kind of easier on me, it's kind of getting difficult to try to do all these little projects, plus the podcast, plus the big projects that I have working on the side, things like this video. It just would make sense to give myself more time in between. So I'll probably do that for now and then switch back to a 2-week schedule potentially once I get things kind of back on track. We'll see. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. This is kind of a little bit of a different thing for me. I'm just kind of messing around, trying out new ideas. It's not perfect. I know that. There's a lot of things that I don't like about it, but I didn't want this to take years. So, well, either way, that's about it. So see you later.